Good evening, everyone. My name is Lily Tony Dames, and I'm a senior immigration attorney at Neighbors Link Community Law Practice. Tonight, I'm going to speak with you about temporary protected status, also known as TPS, and deferred action for childhood arrivals, or DACA. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some recent updates in the last year or so, and let's jump right into it. So what is temporary protected status, or TPS? TPS is a temporary immigration status provided to nationals of specifically designated countries who are unable to return home safely due to extraordinary conditions or circumstances. The Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, or DHS, may designate a country for TPS due to the following temporary conditions in a country: an ongoing armed conflict, such as a civil war, an environmental disaster, such as an earthquake or hurricane, or an epidemic. Other extraordinary and temporary conditions may apply. What are the benefits of TPS? So during a designated period, which can be extended, TPS holders are protected from being removed or deported from the United States. So the level of safety and feeling more stable living within the United States, when of course there is a promise that you will not be removed or deported. You also will be eligible for employment authorization, and if you're residing in New York State, you might also be eligible for certain benefits, including Medicaid, potentially. Also, eligibility for in-state tuition, and you may be permitted to travel abroad by applying for advanced parole. So one thing to note is that even individuals in removal proceedings, or those with final orders, removal orders that is, may still apply for TPS and employment authorization, unless, of course, they are otherwise barred by some type of criminal conviction or otherwise. So there are a few limitations to TPS. Notably, it is temporary, as it suggests, and its benefits expire after the designation period. Applicants must already be present in the United States on the specified date. So that would mean, of course, that TPS is not a means of admission into the United States if you're currently abroad. So someone who is still in the Ukraine at this particular moment in time, since it's already been designated, cannot use TPS as a means of entering the United States. So another limitation is that TPS can be permanently lost through failure to re-register. So if you don't use it, you will lose it, and you will not be able to reapply. So another really important thing to know is that TPS is not a pathway to citizenship or to lawful permanent residence or a green card. So it does not provide a mechanism by which someone who has it can then naturally apply for a green card to remain in the United States permanently. So inadmissibility bars apply, and I'll go over those grounds in the next slide. And all applicants must undergo biometrics. Biometrics are, of course, an appointment that USCIS will set up for the applicant, whereby their fingerprints are taken so that USCIS can run a criminal background check. Further, if TPS is denied, individuals can be placed in removal proceedings if out of status, and knowingly providing false documents or information may subject the applicant to criminal prosecution. For these reasons, it's really important to speak with an attorney before you apply to ensure that you're not going to be barred and therefore run into some type of issue such as removal proceedings being initiated. One such bar is a criminal bar to TPS, whereby an otherwise eligible applicant can be disqualified from TPS if they have been convicted of a single felony or 2 or more misdemeanors. So if you already have TPS status in the United States and you are convicted of a felony, your TPS can be terminated. Likewise, if you have a felony conviction and then apply for TPS, it will be denied. Same is true for 2 or more misdemeanor convictions. So as I mentioned in the previous slide, inadmissibility grounds do apply to TPS applicants. Some of those are not an issue to the extent that they're automatically waived. These include the public charge ground, present without admission or parole, unlawfully present after immigration violations, having previously been removed, being in the United States without documentation, stowaways, and student visa violators. So many of the common immigration violations that could apply to someone are automatically waived for TPS, which does make it considerably easier to apply for, as these grounds would prohibit or be an issue for other types of benefits. So while those are automatically waived, not all inadmissibility grounds are waived. Here is a list of some of the inadmissibility grounds that can be waived, but that would mean requiring a Form I-601, which can be granted for humanitarian, public interest, or family unity purposes. So of course, this is an additional application that must be submitted if you have an inadmissibility ground which applies to you and you're applying for TPS. So some of these grounds include prostitution or commercialized vice, alien smuggling, false claim to U.S. citizenship, drug abuse or addiction, order of deportation within the past year, or deported at U.S. government expense within the last 5 years or 20 years if have aggravated the felony offense, and immigration fraud. So please note that an actual conviction or admission is not required for these to apply. So that's another reason it's really important to go over any criminal conduct and or convictions in history, including any contacts with law enforcement that you may have that could come up with or that could trigger one of the inadmissibility grounds to require a waiver or potentially bar you from having your TPS application granted. So there are many countries that do have current TPS designations. I'm going to discuss those in that reddish color, and that's because these are most recently designated countries, which include very recently Afghanistan and Ukraine, and also Venezuela, Haiti, and Burma, which last year did also receive TPS designation. Some of these other countries have still continued to have registration periods open to apply for TPS, but I won't be discussing that in today's presentation. And then for re-registration only does include some Central American countries, including El Salvador, Honduras, and Nicaragua, and Nepal also applies for re-registration. So one country that did receive TPS designation last year was Venezuela. That registration period opened on March 9th, 2021, and will remain open until September 9th, 2021. So a few more months left, but it is critical that any individual planning to apply for Venezuelan TPS does apply before that date. Furthermore, individuals must also be a national of the country designated or non-citizen having no nationality who has last habitually resided in Venezuela. Furthermore, an applicant must prove that they have continuously resided in the United States since March 8th, 2021, and have been continuously physically present in the United States since March 9th, 2021. So one way for the first requirement or criteria with respect to nationality, passport is good evidence of that, birth certificate, other identity documents, photo and or civil identification cards. Other secondary evidence is also considered, including an affidavit showing proof of efforts to obtain those documents. You may receive an interview if you're unable to produce identity documents, but hopefully you do have some primary source document of your identification to help with that. With respect to continuous residence, a passport stamp showing your date of entry into the United States can help. An I-94 card. For the last few years, you can use the CBP I-94 website to issue you a digital I-94, which is helpful to demonstrate, of course, that you are in the United States. With respect to residence and continuous presence, you might want to submit employment or tax records, recent receipts or utility bills, school records, medical records, even affidavits from people with knowledge. You can get pretty creative with this, but it is important to be able to demonstrate all these things to satisfy this criteria. So another designation from last year was Burma or Myanmar. A registration period opened May 25th of last year, 2021, and will remain open through November 25th of this year, 2022. And of course, you must file within this period in order to retain eligibility. And of course, like any other TPS designation, you have to prove that you are a national of the country, or that you are a non-citizen with no nationality having habitually resided in the designated country. And of course, continuous residence since March 11th, 2021, and demonstration of continuous physical presence since May 25th, 2021. So Haitian TPS, interestingly, this is a new designation. As I mentioned earlier, TPS designations can be extended, which many of them routinely are. But for this particular country, there was a Haitian TPS. Now there is a new designation, which was opened in August of last year, specifically on August 3rd, 2021. And it has a designation period, a registration period, which is open through February 3rd, 2023. So any eligible individual must apply during that period and before February 3rd, 2023. Again, of course, you have to be a national or habitually resided in Haiti and prove continuous residence since July 29th, 2021, and have continuously been present in the United States since August 3rd of last year, 2021. So Ukrainian TPS is a very new designation. This occurred on March 3rd of this year. It will have an 18-month registration period, which of course you must file an initial application within, and you must have continuously resided in the United States since March 1st, 2021. Details about eligibility criteria and the application process will be published in the federal register notices, which are still forthcoming. You have to keep an eye out for the federal register notices to determine what all the specific criteria and dates and requirements for Ukrainian TPS to be sure that you are eligible. Similarly, with respect to Afghanistan, this designation is since March 16th, 2022. It's also an 18-month registration period, and you have had to continuously reside in the United States since March 15th, 2022. But the details about eligibility criteria and the application process are still forthcoming. So you'll again have to review the Federal Register notices when they do become available to the public. So how does one apply for TPS? TPS applications are submitted on Form I-821. If the individual is also planning to seek employment authorization, they will also submit a Form I-765, which is the application for employment authorization. That, of course, is optional. One does not have to do so, but if they do, that is a form that it is that one must use in order to apply for employment authorization. The appropriate fee for the I-821 is $50. Everyone does have to pay that fee who applies unless they are eligible for a fee waiver, which does require supporting documents. Otherwise, you are required to pay the fee. If you plan on filing a fee waiver, you will have to demonstrate that you receive a means-tested benefit, such as Medicaid, SNAP, or SSI, or that your household income is below 150% of the federal poverty line. Which you can do with tax returns, pay stubs, or potentially an employment letter, or any specific financial hardship that applies at the time that would inhibit you from being able to afford paying for the TPS application fees. So something to note about the fees, anyone whose age is 14 to 65 would have to pay the Form I-821 filing fee, which is $50, biometrics fee, which again, of course, is your fingerprints. And if you are requesting a work permit, you will have to pay a $410 I-765 fee for a total of $545. Of course, you'll notice that the Form I-765 does add quite a bit to the entire filing fee total, but people that are under 14 do not have to pay this, and those that are over 66 years do not have to pay this. Furthermore, anyone that's under 14 does not have to pay a biometric fee. So then, of course, as I discussed previously, evidence establishing your nationality or statelessness and last habitual residence will be required to satisfy the eligibility requirements, as well as being able to establish continuous physical presence since the effective date, which of course is delineated and specified by country, and then any certificate of disposition for any arrest, which of course is extremely important, and you're very likely to get a request for evidence. If you do not submit certificates of disposition, they will of course find out about the convictions because of your, they will be fingerprinted for the biometrics appointment at your biometrics appointment. But one really important distinction that TPS has, which is more common in other benefits or immigration benefits within the United States, is that there are no derivatives for TPS. All eligible family members must file their own independent application and demonstrate their own independent eligibility for TPS. So after you file for TPS, you receive a receipt notice and subsequently a biometrics appointment notice. You must attend your biometrics appointment. Technically, they can be rescheduled. Best practices, of course, to attend. They can be difficult to reschedule. Some individuals will receive a request for evidence. This can happen, particularly in criminals with a criminal history. You shouldn't necessarily have an interview with those possible with a TPS application. And eventually, hopefully within 10 to 12 months at least, could potentially be longer, you will receive a decision on your TPS application. So once it's granted and you get your employment authorization, you can also get a restricted Social Security card. If you move, you have to notify USCIS within 10 days by mail or online, and non-citizen males between 18 and 26 must register for selective service. If TPS designation is extended, all applications must be registered during the re-registration period, or you can lose it, as I mentioned. And once you have TPS, if you're otherwise eligible, you should attempt and apply for certain other benefits such as Medicaid and safety net benefits if applicable. Now I will turn to DACA updates. So DACA, or Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, was an executive action that was issued by the Obama administration in 2012 that was meant to protect certain young individuals who enter the United States as children, of course, without their own control. The program doesn't confer legal status or pathway to citizenship, which is, of course, similar to TPS, but also like TPS, it does protect recipients from deportation or removal and allows them to work lawfully in the United States and obtain a Social Security number for a renewable period of 2 years. You also can get advanced parole, which is admission to travel outside the United States with DACA, which is also similar to TPS. And again, you also have to have a reason for traveling, such as humanitarian purposes or education purposes, in order for an advanced parole application to be granted. So there are some really important DACA updates. In July of last year, a federal judge in Texas vacated the 2012 DACA memorandum issued by former DHS Secretary Napolitano, essentially finding that it was unlawful for a number of reasons. This Texas ruling enjoins the government from continued administration of DACA. The court did, however, acknowledge the reliance current DACA recipients had on the program, so it permitted those with DACA before July 16th, 2021, the date of the decision, to retain and renew their DACA and work authorization. Accordingly, those whose DACA applications were approved before July 16th, 2021 will continue to be protected by the program and continue to be eligible to renew their DACA status and work authorization. However, initial DACA applications will not be approved. So anyone who's not previously applied for DACA within the date restrictions cannot now attempt to apply for DACA. Quite a blow. Biden administration, as well as some other defendants in that Texas litigation, did appeal the ruling to the Fifth Circuit. And DHS did publish proposed regulations with respect to DACA on September 28th of last year in 2021, which, among other things, sought to cure the issue that the Texas court had found with the memorandum. So we're now awaiting a final rule from DHS. There was a comment period where the public could report comments on the proposed rule. but that has since closed on November 29th, 2021. So now we are just waiting for DHS to issue the final regulation. Hopefully that will happen in the upcoming months, because certainly it is a travesty that a DACA has been taken away for new potential recipients. So we do hope very much that the proposed regulation, doesn't face other prohibitive litigation, and that it will be restored for so many young people who came to the United States as children. That concludes updates we have for TPS and DACA. If you have any questions regarding this presentation, TPS, DACA, or any other immigration-related matter, you can feel free to call our legal helpline at the NeighborsLink Community Law Practice, which is open every Thursday from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. The number is right there, which is 914-502-3377. We do look forward from hearing from you and hope that you have a lovely evening. Take care.